All right, and we're back, and here we are going to do an overview of DESI's point view section. So we were just looking at the plan view, and you can do it and look at it by pressing this button, or you can jump back to the point view by pressing this button again. So just like the plan view section, we have this domain in the top left, but now we're just dealing with a point, and you can actually move this point wherever you want. And so the data we're looking at right now is the LREF data. And you can drag and drop it, or you could do by site identifier. So here's Broomfield, Colorado, or if we want to go to Sacramento, California, just enter your identifier and hit enter. If you would like to change the location by adjusting the latitude and longitude, you can. You'll notice that submit button popped up. You go ahead and press submit, and it will change your location. So just like with the plan view section, you can change your forecast runtime, you can change your data set, you can group by cluster or ensemble, and what's new here is you have this select member. You can actually turn members on and off. So with all 3 members checked, that would be the grand ensemble, right? That's 100 members. But if you just wanted to look at the European, you can uncheck the guest, uncheck the Canadian, and then bam, I'm just looking at European data now. But I'm going to go ahead and turn them back on. And you can see that I can also hover over these ensembles. So if I want to look at, let's say, the European again, I can click on it and it will stay highlighted while I look at all the different graphs here. And if I hover over a different model, you can now get a different color. You can click it to lock it. And if you click on another model or hover over another model, you now get a different color. So that can be somewhat useful. All right, so with these point view graphs, you can click and drag and zoom. Then I can left click again to zoom out. So click and I'm holding it, drag, it zooms, left click, zooms out. So a lot of times when you're forecasting, you may only care about one particular variable. So this is the overview section, but you can also click on this by variable button. And there's another trick that I want to show you. Let's say you're in the overview section and you want to go to the by variable view. Just double click the variable you want to view. So I just double click temperature and you can see it here now. Anyways, I'm looking at the max temperature. This looks like Tuesday at 5 p.m. and I can view all 100 members here. And again, if I only wanted to look at the European, I can just look at the European in my chiclet charts, but let's turn them back on. Anyways, we're looking at Tuesday afternoon temperatures, and we get a nice histogram of all the temperatures down at the bottom. And I can see just by the histogram, the most likely temperature is going to be right around 75 degrees, with these cooler ensemble members still showing up. You've got a couple below 65 and even one above 80. So histogram is just a nice way to look at the data quite quickly. If you don't want to look at a histogram, you can do box whisker plots. Again, it's the same data, just presented in a different way. And you can hover over these left values to see where they fit in the distribution. If you like plumes, you can do plumes. This is plume by ensembles. Okay, you got the guest, Canadian, European, and the grand ensemble there. But if you want to do plumes by all the members, you can do that too by changing this graph style to plumes parentheses member. All right, so one last thing to look at is clustering. So if I press this clustering button, we're going to cluster again on the 500 millibar heights, do the principal components analysis, and then the silhouette analysis to group our clusters. So these are the same clusters I believe we're looking at in the plan view video. You can see we got higher heights over the west coast represented by these shadings of orange. And for cluster 1, that's relative to the grand ensemble. Cluster 2, you got lower heights over California. You would expect it to be a cooler solution. And then cluster 3, you got lower heights really over the entire Pacific Northwest, represent probably a cooler solution there too. So let's go to, say, Sacramento. And as I hover over these clusters, you can see where they fit in the distribution. This is not a particularly great case because there's not a big variation between the clusters. And we saw that in the plan view charts. Let me try Seattle to see if we get a bigger variation between the clusters. And you can see in Seattle, I'm going to click cluster 1, obviously the warmest cluster. And you can see the temperatures here in the top right. Cluster 1, it's 54 degrees. Cluster 2 has 51 degrees. So again, not a big variation in the clusters for this particular case, but the differences can actually be quite large at times. So just wanted to show you a few more things. You can click the settings button and you can turn this highlight cluster period on or off. So let me jump back to cluster. We were clustered on day 7. We had a yellow box there. You see it's gone, and then now it's back. So if you ever want to turn that on and off, you can. And just want to also show you can select the different data sets here. So if you wanted to look at the href over the CONUS, you can certainly do that. And if you're interested in the QMD data, you can just go under this data set and select QMD CONUS, and that will get you the 6-hour and 24-hour QMD data. Again, if you want to look at these things by variable, you certainly can. And here you get a layout of all the distribution, or the distribution of the members of the QMD data set. The guest actually happens to be missing in this particular day, but normally it is there. So that wraps up the point view section of DESI.